Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. So I touched on this a few videos back about how capitalism just sucks in general, but something that I just slightly touched on that I would like to elaborate on is that capitalism makes life hell for disabled people. So right off the bat, if you have, for example, an innovation, right? Like to tie it back into the video about capitalism actually stifling innovation. Let's say you have an innovation that can only help a few hundred to a few thousand people, but it's still an innovation. It would dramatically improve the quality of their life and their life experience and their life expectancy. But if you had that and it could only, improve a handful of lives in terms of the grand market availability, people wouldn't invest in it because it's not profitable enough to do so. The amount of profit you're going to make off of just a few hundred or a few thousand people is incredibly limited. This is again tying back to how capitalism not only stifles innovation, but also makes life hell for people who have disabilities. So if you can't get like funding and support, you're not going to get these services that are needed. And so again, if you are looking for a cure for cancer, what's more profitable, a cure or a treatment that can help make it manageable? Or maybe it does cure it, but the treatment is prohibitively expensive. That's another problem. So there's, no real avenue for the desire to innovate an actual affordable cure within a capitalist system. And again, if you require like medication or some kind of physical aid or a mobility aid of some kind, guess what capitalism does for you? It makes it prohibitively expensive because it's not affordable to have wheelchairs, walkers, canes, powered wheelchairs, scooters, seeing eye dogs, accessibility for service dogs and wheelchairs and widening doors and things like that. People who become handicapped or paraplegic or quadriplegic, they often need the doors in their homes widened, which again costs money, which for anyone who's ever had to live off a disability paycheck, you don't really have money when you're disabled. Because again, it's a capitalist nightmare out there and it's not profitable to do so. And really, we're just getting started, right? Like that's just one horror story. Here's some more horror stories. You know all these supposedly feel-good stories that are really just a capitalist dystopia just spun around by some news media organization? It's, oh, look, this poor, amputee, their insurance wouldn't cover it. So a bunch of, thoughtful and kind students 3D printed one for 1/10 of the price. So this begs the question, A, why wasn't insurance covering this when the whole point of insurance is that it covers shit? And then B, why is it still so expensive even though it didn't cover it? This is supposed to be something that is to help improve or serve as an innovation and an improvement upon someone's life, right? It's always just a hellhole wrapped up in some kind of, pretend feel good, but when you scratch beneath the surface, it's terrifying. And beyond, having to 3D print more affordable versions of, arms or wheelchairs put together by like a team or a charity or something, these are objectively nice things, but the reason why they have to be done should just terrify and outrage all of us. And yet this is the reality for people who have some form of disability in a capitalist system that doesn't take their disability into account, especially if it's a mental disability. If you're disabled, capitalism is not your friend. It really isn't. If you're disabled, this system, it's not fair, it's not equitable, and it's not desirable. It practically wants to kill you if you're disabled. And, I don't know how many people had to do this, but in my high school, as part of our phys ed thing, we had to do a week of phys ed, but with some kind of impairment to show us what it's like to be physically disabled. And so this was really our first life lesson in ableism. So, we're doing wheelchair basketball and stuff, but then, oh, hey, try and wheel yourself out and up and down these halls and these ramps, and it's difficult, and you need to rely on a service elevator. And, there's people always crowding around the hallways. Some hallways are just barely big enough for a wheelchair. Others, you have to kind of like turn sideways. Your lockers are not really well suited for someone who is in a wheelchair, for instance. So that was just, that little moment. And that spurred me to look around and realize how many other businesses and places, whether they're public or private, are not wheelchair accessible. They'll say they are, but then it's like you got to go practically 5 kilometers out of your way to then, go on some low-lying flat ground and then make your way back up and down like a shipping and receiving corridor full of trucks and stuff. It's not a good system. It is an afterthought. There is no innovation to speak of here. It is an afterthought because it is not profitable, and capitalism fucking sucks if you're disabled. Have I made my point clear enough yet? Like, seniors have to move out of their homes because of mobility problems. So either they need like an expensive stair lift thing, or they need to sell the home and move into a bungalow or a condo because of mobility issues. Or we throw them into a home where they're left to rot with dementia, physical problems, overcrowded, 4 elderly people to a room in some cases. That's profitable, right? The main thing people should be getting from this, whether you're a leftist like me or someone else, is this should be very clear proof that government should not be run like a business, because business does not care about providing necessary services. It only cares about satisfying a customer base and satisfying the needs of their shareholders and profitability margins. The point of government is to provide service, not business. And this is why the idea of government should be run like a business is insidious, and it's dangerous, and it's irresponsible. People who say this just say it because they feel that things would be simpler and easier, and they would find efficiencies while still making it profitable. The problem is people who would rely on those services would fall by the wayside, and the purpose of society is to take care of the lowest among us. That's why we're not living in caves and still, fighting each other in the jungles of Africa. It's what allowed us to spread beyond that continent, and it's what gave us civilization. People taking care of each other and divvying up responsibilities and providing services is what allowed for people to get old in the first place. I am so tired of hearing of this business is the answer to everything and get rid of regulations and it's a problem. That's a topic for another video. But to stay on the fact that, disabled people really struggle under capitalism. If you invent a bike design for a small market, it's not too profitable, so banks and businesses aren't going to fund it. If you, despite, the massive pools of capital that they have at their disposal, whatever you might do, if you can invent a bike or a car that actually helps disabled people, an improved wheelchair or aircraft design or just general principles of architecture, that would then be so expensive to implement, even though there is like trillions upon trillions in available capital to be invested, but they don't invest it. Instead, they just sit on it, hoarding wealth like grotesque, wrinkly white dragons. And, no one gets the actual services, the support, and the help they need because it's not profitable under a capitalist system, despite there being more than enough money to be thrown at the problem and more than solve it. And yet here we are, just, sitting here wondering, oh, how come we can't take care of these people? And for those also thinking, well, we should also help out veterans. You want to know why they don't help veterans? Because it's not fucking profitable. Like, that's it. That's the point of all of this. If it's not profitable, the services aren't going to be there. If you want to solve homelessness, if you want to solve opioid crisis, if you want to solve the struggles that people with disabilities have to face under capitalism, if you want to solve so many of these problems, you need to get over capitalism. That is the fundamental problem, just tearing away at our social fabric. And I'm probably missing a lot of other things because this is just an off-the-cuff rant. And that's what I do. I just sit here and rant about stuff that pisses me off. But this should piss everybody off. This should make everyone absolutely seething with rage because we are letting people in our society down for no other reason than it's not profitable to help them. How have we gotten to this point? Like, I'm sorry, was the foundation of society in caveman times profit driven? Was that a thing? Was a profit motive really a thing that existed when we still didn't understand how things like the climate worked and biology? There's billions in capital that is being hoarded instead of invested. And all these problems that I've touched upon that are tangential to the whole capitalism makes life hell for disabled people, all these problems and more are because of capitalism. Capitalism, despite all the ways they say, look at how we're improving things, capitalism is an obstacle to the betterment of society and to the betterment of humanity. And I am so tired of hearing that capitalism spurs innovation and it finds efficiencies. I don't want efficiencies to be found if it comes at the expense of someone's life. That's really what this ultimately boils down to as what's driving my anger. And I wish more people realize this. And the fact that there aren't more people who realize this is definitely what's bothering me today.